You want me to put that on my Tudor?
This One's Wife. Exclusive. The King's Onslaught against the Sussexes. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I've explained to you before that King Charles is a narcissist. This One's Wife is a narcissist. And therefore, there'd be instances where the two would clash. As a consequence of information that is about to be made available to the world, following investigative work undertaken by Byline Times, more can be revealed about the manipulations that have gone on in relation to the activity concerning certain advisors and staff and employees of King Charles in relation to the behaviour of this one's wife and Harry, also involving the journalist Dan Wootton. You may recall that a little while ago, Dan Wootton, who has been a repeated critic of this one's wife, was accused of being involved in blackmail and serial sexual catfishing. He denied the allegations, but has faced an investigation and was removed from his position at the Daily Mail and GB News. Byline Times has undertaken further work which enables you to understand more on an exclusive basis about the behaviour of this one's wife and Harry and the retaliation that has come from the King. King Charles withdrew his £700,000 funding deal for his son Prince Harry and this one's wife's transition to a life in Canada in retaliation, nullification of threat to control, for the naming of a top royal aide in legal papers alleging a cash for leaks arrangement with the journalist Dan Wootton, Byline Times can reveal. The financial sanction came after the Duke of Sussex defied the demands of the then Prince of Wales and palace staff by declining to remove the name of former Kensington Palace Press Secretary Christian Jones from a letter before action to Wootton's former employer, The Sun, in May 2020. Accordingly, Prince Harry did not do as the then Prince Charles required him to do. That was a threat to control, and therefore the narcissist king, by way of retaliation, pulled their funding. Jones denies any suggestion of wrongdoing or leaking confidential information about the royal household. The matters alleged in the letter before action about him appear to have been dropped. But the sudden defunding of the Sussexes in late June 2020 led to the collapse of the Sandringham Agreement governing a 12-month trial period as the couple sought to split their time between the United Kingdom and Canada and remove themselves from the royal rota, the press pool given exclusive inside access to cover the royals. As you know, this one's wife sought a retreat to Canada as part of nullifying the threat to control that was posed by an unfavourable media, an increasingly disgruntled royal family, and also members of the public that had begun to become fed up of her behaviour. It came just 3 months into the trial period and led directly to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex having to enter into private commercial arrangements in the United States to pay the estimated £3 million a year cost of 24-hour security for their family. This detail shows that this is a substantial burden that they have, and, in the absence of support from the King, demonstrates the desperation that they have in relation to this particular residual benefit for this one's wife. One well-placed source with knowledge of the matter told Byline Times they threatened, use of threat, the removal of the funding to try and protect the royal household from a potential courtroom scandal with Jones and Wootton very publicly at the centre. The actual removing of the funding weeks later was about control, and indeed it was, because from then Prince Charles's perspective, the failure of Harry to do what was required of him amounted to a threat to control, and thus there was this retaliation. It was designed to force Harry and this one's wife to come back to the senior royal family, i.e. bring them back under control, in the United Kingdom, where their security would be assured. Accordingly, what their then Prince Charles was doing was seeking to nullify the threat to control posed by their departure overseas by saying, you won't be able to afford your funding, I've pulled part of the payment of that, you can't fund your own security, you're going to have to come back. The source added, the greater truth is that Harry and this one's wife make better headlines than the King and Camilla or William and Kate. The idea of them still being in public service but abroad and out of the control of the institution and dominating the media narrative just couldn't happen. Again, all of that would amount to threats to control to the King. Senior members of the family wanted them back after the transition period and were ready to continue playing dirty to make this happen. They never thought the trial period would work and tried everything to make it fail, starting with the removal of security and then, and this is interesting with regard to the allegation of an onslaught against them, the signing off of a 12-month assault by the UK press on Harry and this one's wife and everyone in their orbit. As always, I leave it up to you to determine the veracity of this information that has been placed before me. Might this be a further attempt to buoy up the image of this one's wife by suggesting that the King made this Machiavellian move against them and thereafter unleashed the dogs of war against them with a 12-month assault? Is it a further attempt through this newspaper to smear the royal family? Or is it accurate, and in actual fact is demonstrative of the needs of the narcissist that is Charles to ensure that this one's wife and Harry were brought back under control? As far as the institution of the monarchy went, the Sussexes are either to be safely in the tent in Britain or cast away and castigated as comprehensively as possible in order to reduce the threat of them eclipsing the rest of the family. It's no surprise they have endured such a degrading time from such a willing British media when the same just isn't true elsewhere in the world. Well, I'm not sure that's entirely accurate, because whilst the British media has been scathing about them, so has the media in Germany and Spain and the United States. As part of a 3-year special investigation into the professional and personal conduct of Dan Wootton, Byline Times has spoken to several sources with connection to the royal households about how the partner of Christian Jones, a publicist, came to be paid £4,000 by Rupert Murdoch's The Sun in August 2019, allegedly for articles relating to the Sussexes. It is understood that the professional publicist admits to receiving the payments, but has claimed they were for other stories about a reality television star with a similar name to the Duchess of Sussex. Jones has always denied being the source of any unauthorized information about the Sussexes getting into the press, including details of a written summary that Prince Harry had given Prince Charles in December 2019 of plans to move his family to North America, which Wootton reported initially on the front page of The Sun on the 7th of January 2020, before running day after day of negative coverage. As we know, Dan Wootton has never been a fan of Harry or this one's wife. In his best-selling book Spare, the Duke of Sussex said Wootton's information including a telling detail about an offer to relinquish their titles. There was only one document on earth in which that detail was mentioned, my private and confidential letter to my father, he writes, to which a shockingly, damningly small number of people had access. We hadn't mentioned it to even our closest friends. Byline Times can reveal how the story, so-called Megxit, was published on the same day the Sussexes were planning their own announcement. It prompted a constitutional crisis, and wrongly claimed that Prince Harry had blindsided his then 93-year-old grandmother, provoking a widespread public backlash, when in fact, according to Spare, the Queen had been aware of it since the 3rd of January. In the book, in which Wooten is referred to as a sad little man, Prince Harry revealed how a further meeting set up with the Queen was blocked by palace staff, and how she had already signed off on a previous plan for her grandson and this one's wife to move, in part, to South Africa. Thus, this article, which is yet to be published, suggests that there was chicanery that was coming from the royal family via Charles for the purposes of seeking to assert control over Harry and this one's wife by pulling their funding and authorising a 12-month onslaught. Do you believe that that's the case? Do you believe that it was justified as a response to their behaviours in order to bring them back under control? Also, Dan Wooten has been involved in this as a conduit for releasing this information. And there'll be more about that in future parts. So, don't go anywhere, as there is more interesting and juicy allegations that follow about the whole network involving this one's wife, Harry, Dan Wooten, and the royal family. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.